Come down, so when we're sitting on the desk, it wasn't pulling itself. So we wanted to put the head in on one of those.
Thanks so much. You too. Yeah.
They're so bright in here too.
Yeah, I've got a good pair of really light sunglasses to wear inside.
Yeah, I'm gonna put mine on first.
Because the sunglasses that were outside are too dark to wear inside the building.
All right, so I think some people are still walking in from the last session, so we'll give it another maybe 2 minutes, and then we'll start at 1:10.
Sounds good.
Back here.
I don't know. Can we actually test it? I think I threw it off.
Hey.
Hi, Jerry.
Hey, how's it going?
I need to talk to you after this.
Of course. What about?
No, Kaylee's graduation thing. You know, diploma, Braille.
Oh,
I have a copy.
If you have a copy, I can take it right now.
Yeah, I put my address on it so you would just know.
Yeah, that's easy
Give
enough.
it to you. This would be so wonderful. You
Yeah,
know, you
I'm
know what I'm
more
talking
happy.
about because you
Yeah.
went on your trip.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That's just a copy. I hope that's okay.
Yeah,
Kind
no,
of a
that's
little-
perfect. Yeah, well, do you want to do a Braille overlay and then send you that?
Something's better than I can do.
Okay, well, let me see what the copies looks like. So we can put,
Oh, no, not onto this.
so I can do one of two things. So I can make a
They
Braille
wouldn't
copy.
give me her real. They wouldn't give me her real.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So do you want something to put over that? So I can
Yeah,
give
say
you,
something
I can give you
that's
a Braille
nice.
paper version, and then I'll give you a Braille overlay.
Okay.
So then when she does
Like a
receive,
clear one?
yeah, when she receives her official, then she can put that on there.
All right. That's
Okay.
what I
All right, I'll hold on to this.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, let me know what the cost.
Oh, that's okay. We'll do, no problem.
I did, I know.
You have a mouse too.
Time I would have done it. He just didn't, so.
All right. Well, I think we're gonna get started, and first off, I think we're gonna start with just getting a sense of who all's in the room, and go through an introduction. So, if you want to say your name, the organization you're with, or if you're not with the organization, how you came to be here. So we'll go ahead and start. Sheila.
I'm Sheila Irwin, TBI, Phoenix Union High School District.
I'm Lynn Sadler, and I'm at Tempe Union High School District.
Joe Odekirchen, I'm itinerant TBI here with Foundation for Blind Children.
I'm Laura Manley, and I am a student here at FBC.
James Chamberlain, student here at FBC.
Linda Perkins, a student at FBC.
Cynthia Woods, CVRT with FBC.
Valerie Curley, VI with Arizona School for Deaf and Blind.
Cesar Yanes, I don't know. I guess I'm here because I'm gonna present, well, like, yeah, just present, I guess, our couple of minutes for the blind Buccaneers.
Awesome.
Jasmine Wilson, I'm a large print technician here at the museum.
Sandy Benson, orientation mobility specialist from the SER co-op in Tucson.
Dorinda Rife, I'm a O&M specialist, a low vision specialist, a private consultant.
Linda Keating, I'm a student here at FBC.
My name is Angel Romo Camacho, and I'm a student here at FBC.
I'm Martha Castilla, and I'm a TBI from San Diego.
And I'm Danya Emerson, and I'm an itinerant TBI for FBC.
I'm Melanie Audette, and I'm an itinerant TBI and O&M for FBC.
Jared Leslie, Director of Media Services for FPC, and all four of us were actually a part of the Blind Buccaneers, so we're excited to talk about it today.
I'm Chris Hawk. I'm the IT Director here at FPC, and we're waiting on Spencer Churchill. We're going to go ahead and get started, but Spencer Churchill is one of the four presenters as well, and he is on his way back from an errand, I believe. So
he's just getting off the boat.
Yeah.
It's a very long trip. Very long trip. It's November. Yeah, he's got a big trip.
Smart man, considering where you started.
Exactly. So, do you want to talk a little bit about the origination of the idea, and let's get some background as far as what the Blind Buccaneers are?
Yeah, so the Foundation for Blind Children, I believe it was 2009, did their first, what we started calling challenge events. And it's not a structured program that happens on a regular basis or is standard. They're these events that we as an organization plan and orchestrate, and the intention behind these events is there's quite a few. It's to kind of break down barriers for our students and show them that they can do these things that sighted people do, that they probably never thought they would have the opportunity to do or never thought they'd be able to do. It shows the public that our blind and visually impaired students can do these things. So the same thing, breaking down those barriers, as well as just kind of promotional for the blind and VI community. Do you guys have anything to tag on to that?
Yeah, and just to give a point of reference to some of the challenge events that we've done in the past, we've hiked and also gone down the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon. We have hiked to the top of Kilimanjaro as well, and we have also swam Alcatraz too. And so this is just another iteration of those challenge events to try and push the expectation.
I think we did the Grand Canyon rim to rim in a day, and a 5K mud run. So we tend to do these every few years. They're all different. We try and kind of keep it interesting, doing different activities, but again, breaking down these barriers for our students. And kind of our motto here at the Foundation for Blind Children is vision is a diagnosis, not a disability. So it kind of goes along with that. So what was it, 2017, I think? Spencer Churchill and myself were kind of talking about the river trip that we had been on and how life-changing this whole event was, and trying to figure out something that we could do that would be different and very unique for our students. And so we kind of came up with this idea of sailing. Didn't really know what it would look like, but we wanted to take our students sailing. So we got some other staff involved, Melanie, Jared, Mark Ashton, and some other staff members here at FPC, and we planned this voyage to Puerto Rico, where we sailed for 5 days, and we hit 5 different islands, I believe. So we circumnavigated the Spanish Virgin Islands, stopping at all these different islands and beaches, and through storms, and so.
Yeah. What's up on the screen right now is actually just a representation of pins and GPS pins that were put out so that parents could follow, parents and family members could follow along with where we were at. And it shows the kind of the length that we went in the ocean, and then also the different islands that we hit as well.
Yeah. So sailing, as you might imagine, is not something everybody knows how to do. Is there a show of hands of anybody that's been on a sailboat? Yeah, several. So
a lot more in this room than I expected.
How many know how to sail? Could sail a boat with maybe a name or two.
I'm not very good at it.
That's probably a better question. Yeah. So the first step for this was training. Is that where we're at? So the first step was this: all of our challenge events have started with training. Kind of the prep work has always been training, team building, and fundraising. And so we had to figure out a training plan, and we decided, it's kind of hard to find a place to sail in Arizona. But we did find a company up at Lake Pleasant, Tiller and Kites, with Victor. And Victor has a sailing school, like I said, called Tiller and Kites, and they helped us orchestrate a sailing course for our students and staff. And we went out there. Do you remember how many lessons it was?
Before the students or with the students?
Oh yeah, I guess I should back up. So we didn't know how to sail either, and we decided that we probably needed to figure that part out first. Spencer Churchill, who is now here, and myself and Melanie, we went out and sailed with Victor. We went through the course first, 110 degrees in the middle of the summer, but it was a blast. And then after that was over, we went to San Diego, chartered a boat and sailed for a day with the three of us. So that was the first step, and then we assisted Victor with putting together this training program to teach our students how to sail, and went out to Lake Pleasant again on, I think it was 5 different Saturdays. We started with swim lessons, made sure all of our students knew how to swim with and without life vests in a pool. And then we got them on the boats, taught them about the boats, the parts of the boat, and how to sail the boats. So how to move around the boats and just kind of everything that goes along with that. Is there anything else anybody can think about training? And then
yeah. So when we started training here at FBC, we had about half an hour that we were in the boardroom to go over concepts. So things like where the direction of the wind was coming in, how to capture that within the sail, how to call out whether you were in irons or, as you can see in some of the photos that are on the screen, we have one where we're actually practicing tying knots as well. You have one where we're on a boat kind of walking around and orienting themselves on the boat. These ones are a little bit smaller than what we were actually sailing on. And then you actually have the man of the hour in the classroom. Cesar is actually swimming in the pool there as well for his test.
So as you might imagine, sailing is for most people is a very visual sport. So we had to figure out how to adapt to this. And so Spencer's going to talk about kind of how we took this training program and adapted that for our students.
Yeah, so the program manual that Tiller and Kites offers is around, I think it was 72 print pages. So we put that into an accessible format, and we offered it to Braille for any of the students who wanted it in Braille, which was nice. But the primary source of our learning was on the boats and in the classroom, talking about the different concepts. So we had different model sailboats that we used and would talk about how the different parts of the sail work depending on where the wind is coming from. So we would turn on a little fan and use that as the wind and adjust the sails on our model sailboat accordingly. We had the opportunity to explore a ton of different boats outside of the water up at Lake Pleasant, so all the students were able to go underneath the boat, feel how large the big keel is, which keeps the whole boat balanced that's underneath the water. And what else did we have? We had a couple different tactile diagrams of how the different sails work and how it changes based off the wind. So there was plenty of opportunity for live instruction, more so than the textbook that the training program offers.
I'm gonna dance.
These are just some more pictures of the training process. So some more knot tying. We learned how to tie 5 different knots. Don't ask me how to tie any of them right now. So I couldn't tell you. I always ended up tying it like a shoelace no matter what the situation was. We had different flags printed with our logo on it. The logo has a crossbones on the right eye and a patch over the left eye with the blind buccaneers in a pirate-themed print with the Braille blind buccaneers below it, and instead of 2 swords going through the skull, we had 2 white canes. Because of the size of the training boats we had, only a few of the staff members were able to participate with the students during the training. So the rest of the staff that were a part of the whole event had to teach themselves how to sail on those tiny little one-person boats that you might see up there. Jared might be able to tell you more about that.
As you can see, the students actually receive the certification, so they are certified to be able to sail. For those of us that were guides in challenge events, and we even had talked about the mud run and other things that are available, it's a very important thing that you are present when you're there for those events. Everybody wants to be there on the big day, but you have to be there at the training. And just to give an example, even for the running, we set the hard and fast rule. You had to be at 80% of the practices for that mud run. First person that reached that limit was actually my brother, and I had to publicly fire him in front of everyone. So we keep that hard and fast as a whole, even though we weren't being certified and sailing, but we had to be there every day for the training. We had to make sure that we were with our buddy who was going to be our partner while we were sailing. And then one of the gentlemen that was on the sailing trip actually had a couple of little lasers, that's what they're called. So they're single person sailboats. So we got to go through taking the concepts that we covered with the students in the boardroom and here, and then take that out onto the actual lake as well. I can tell you I was the one that flipped it every time for it, because I got really excited about, like, oh, look how fast I'm going. So those things flip fast. And so the gentleman that let us borrow that, he was very gracious and allowed for us to be successful, to be able to joke about that with our students as well. But you can see that's one of the practice boats that we use so that we could cover the same concepts that the students were covering. That one actually, it looks like a little clog as well, but the other ones are a little bit straighter and easier to flip. That one's hard to flip, but I did not attempt yet. Okay, so should I advance?
Yeah. One more quick thing I wanted to add. If you go back one slide, actually. One more, I'm sorry. So there's a picture of wine and burgers, and I don't know if you guys already touched on this, so you can throw something at me if I'm repeating.
No, you're good.
But one of the biggest challenges of this whole event was the fundraising piece of it. So we didn't have any dedicated money for this event, and we had to go through the entire training process, the flights, the hotels, and renting the boats in Puerto Rico, which is no cheap feat. So with a bunch of discounts and all that through each of those different pieces, we ended up needing to get around $65,000. And so we had to privately fundraise all of that, and that was part of the requirements for the students, staff, and sponsors as well. So there were different thresholds. So each student, Caesar included, fundraised over $1,500. The staff fundraised over $2,500, and the sponsors of the event fundraised over $5,000 each. So the picture up there of the wine and sliders was from one of the sponsors' fundraising events that they did specifically for our event, and we ended up covering our cost, and were able to also garner an extra, I think it was $20,000 to $25,000. So we were very lucky and fortunate to have that kind of support from the community.
That's great.
Thanks.
Good point.
there's the picture on the final days of training. It ended up coinciding with regatta, which is a fancy word for race in the sailing world. They have a different word for everything, including right and left. And on that final day, the race course was not very clearly understood. I don't think any of our boats knew where we were going, and I think 4 of the 5 boats ended up not even finishing because we had no idea where we were going. So the only boat that did finish was the guy Victor, who has done this race like 10 times. So it ended up still being a fun day, and that's when all the students and staff received their International Yacht Training Certificate, which allows you to, I believe the exact verbiage is, rent a vessel up to 9 meters during daylight, and take it no more than 5 miles offshore. So pretty restrained, but Chris and I have utilized that license already, and it's a pretty cool skill and license to have. So there's the points of sale. That's the exact diagram that we used and turned into a tactile map, and used the wind to kind of show why the sails have to be in those certain positions. And then there's a picture of one of the training days with one of the students at the tiller in the far back. You can see her holding, so that's kind of like the steering wheel. The student closest to the picture is getting ready to adjust the sails, and the student on the left is getting ready to adjust one of the sails, and the other student is soaking up the sunshine.
One of the particular hard things was describing where the wind's coming from. So if somebody asked you, make the sound of wind, what would you do? But how do you do it loud enough to have an entire room know what that is? So it's a ghost. Yeah. So that's the wind.
So when we didn't have a fan available and we were trying to work on a concept with the students, Jared was very good at being our
I was always the wind. Yarwind was my nickname.
One more adaptation on the top of every boat, so that big tall pole that goes straight up in the air, the mast, there's a wind indicator for you to visually see where the wind is coming from, and you want to steer the boat and the sails according to that position. And that is hard enough for a person without any visual impairment to see. So add the visual impairment into the mix and it's impossible. So what we did instead was we got like maybe a 4-inch dowel, little piece of wood, and it attached a piece of cassette tape actually. We glued or taped that on to the top of it. And then so each student had their own little pocket wind indicator, which was pretty cool.
So you guys got really creative.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was just about a 6-inch piece of ribbon, but then they could kind of feel which would be that, because that cassette tape was very, very light in the wind, so they could feel which way it was going.
It was harder to find cassette tape.
You
than
destroyed
anything
something.
Recycle.
Yeah.
Recycle, repurpose.
Kind of moving along onto the adaptations while we were on the trip. So you can't really do much about trying to find a comfortable seat on the plane, as you can tell by the neck position. The 2 of our students there sleeping on the plane. We had the whole back half of the plane reserved. We were quite the rowdy bunch. Our flight out was at 2:50 a.m. So it was an interesting morning. But when we first got there, we loaded the boats and oriented the students like you would any other unfamiliar area by kind of taking them in a perimeter view of the boat. So we started in the entrance of the boat, walked around the outside of it until we got back to the entrance, and then from that entrance we were able to go and explore the rest of the pieces, and the students were able to understand where the different ropes are and the different parts of the sail, and start to put it together that even though this is a boat that's almost twice as large, if not larger, than the boat that we had trained on, they're still all those same pieces, and the mechanics of it all are still the same. It's just on a much larger scale.
Yeah, if I can real quick, the boats we trained on were, I think, majority of them were about 30-foot monohulls, so the kind of your typical sailboat you would see. in the Puerto Rico trip, they were 45-foot catamarans, so the dual hull boats. So the sailing concepts are the same, but they were much larger boats than they had trained on. So there was a little bit more orientation, but as far as, like I said, the concepts, it was transferable.
The first day we were there, we got the chance to do a little tour of, they call it Old San Juan, so the capital of the mainland of Puerto Rico. So our tour guide was super helpful and took us through this amazing fort where there were all sorts of historical artifacts and colonial structures. It was really amazing, and we were lucky enough that most of those diagrams were tactile. You could feel the cobblestone streets. You can feel the chips on the fading structures and the foundations of the building. You could go inside of an old prison cell where they would lock up prisoners and nothing but a little window to look through. So it was a pretty immersive experience to be able to walk around a city like that, and add in the fact that all of the tour artifacts were accessible just by its nature. So that made that part really exciting.
So I'll talk a little bit about some of our skills of independence, things that we incorporated and thought about going into the trip that we wanted to make sure it wasn't just, the kids are going sailing, but that they're learning a lot about themselves and independence. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So one of the things I was responsible for, along with Jared, we kind of teamed up kind of some extra fun activities outside of just a day of sailing. What are you going to do with 12 teenagers who aren't using their cell phones and getting on the internet? How are you going to keep them entertained and make this a meaningful experience and keep them engaged? So we did some fun kind of like nightly games. And a lot of the students didn't really know each other before the trip. There was maybe a couple who were familiar with each other, had done the summer program, but maybe only 2 that were really close. So it was really fun to kind of get them to engage and be social with one another. And so some of the night games that we did, this was a picture taken on our first night, kind of in the marina. This was our second day in Puerto Rico. And we created kind of like team names, and we each got a pirate name. So Jared's, as you heard already, was Yarwind. Mine.
It's on my email signature now.
Yeah.
So no explanation.
Mine was kind of piggybacked off of one of our sponsors who came on the trip. His pirate name was Fluff Bucket. And then I kind of went off of, because I kind of like the bucket, I was called, actually I didn't go with that one. I went with Basic Flan was my pirate name, and actually my student Cesar helped me come up with that because I was saying flan wrong the whole time when we were in Puerto Rico, and I guess it's too basic. I was saying flan. So it was kind of fun. We all just really got a lot of laughs out of creating pirate names, and some of the other things we did Jeopardy, and it was kind of intertwined with kind of our trip, and it kind of reviewed the sailing terms and some things about maybe the sponsors, as the students hadn't maybe known all of the sponsors. They knew us staff from just being involved in FBC, so it's kind of a fun way to kind of get them to know each other. Some other things we did, we passed around, we had papers, and each of the students that were paired with an adult, was their scribe, and so the students were able to pick like a person that they were going to write about. So they wrote down their pirate names, and they would write a story for about 1 minute, and then they would have to stop and then pass it to the next person. And it was just kind of a fun way. We read the stories at the end. So one started from, Captain Ellie was beginning, her journey as an admiral on the seas, and then it turned into something with warfare and, some other funny, I guess, teenager type stuff. I guess if warfare's funny, but it's not. But it's just creative, and the kids always got a good laugh out of it. And then blanking on the other game that we did. So some of the nights we would all gather all on one boat, and we would get to the boats through a little boat we call it a dinghy. And so it's just like a small inflatable boat with a small motor that could probably hold about 4 people that you could transport, because we would anchor the boats, and we weren't up on a dock when we were sailing. We were kind of in the middle you know, by a shore, but kind of just out in the ocean. So to either get to a boat, you either had to swim or you had to catch a ride with one of the dinghies. So it was fun. Some of the nights we kind of did our own thing, but we did a couple of really group activities, which was fun. So.
We also did fishbowl.
Oh yes, we did fishbowl. Fishbowl is a game where everybody that's participating might throw in 2 or 3 pieces of paper. It could be a phrase, it could be a celebrity, it could just be something funny. You put it into a fishbowl and you're in 2 teams, and then you have to, the first round is kind of describe what the word is, and your team has to guess it, and you have a minute, and you see how many points you can get. And then the second round, once you've used all the words and you're familiar, you go into charade, so you start acting it out. And then the last one is you just have, once you are very familiar after 2 rounds, then you just have a one-word description for what you're reading on the card, and it can't be that word. So it's really fun keeping the kids engaged, and a lot of them laughed, and a lot of them didn't like the rules sometimes, but it was fun.
Some of the adults didn't like the
Some
rules.
of the adults
Probably voice their opinion too much.
Yeah. too many clarifications.
Yeah.
But it was just really fun. I think just to kind of, I don't mean to recap before the presentation's over, but it was just an amazing trip, having all of the students and the adults, just everyone. I would just say that the trip couldn't have gone more smoothly than it did. Just the interactions between the teenagers, getting to bond, just all of the games, and what could have been, you know, a lot of people kind of, you know, potentially butting heads when you're with a bunch of people out on the seas for 7 days, you're not touching land often, and some students are choosing not to shower. It was just a really good coinciding trip with everyone.
So there was 4 students and 4 adults on each boat. There were 3 boats, and then each one of them had a captain as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about the dynamic with the captains when we get a little bit later in the presentation too. But that kind of sets up who all was on the boat. So you have 5 people in a very, or really have more. No, 9. I can't add 9. Yes, jeez, I'm in front of a crowd. Yeah. So 9 people that were in very tight quarters in a place where they've never been, and so the nightly games were to kind of break that open and allow for a safe space to joke and laugh outside of the goal of sailing where we were getting that day. So the skills of independence, also sharing your story in front of the audience. So this is a photo of the entire group at one of the islands that we stopped at, where we did a little bit of a hike and ventured inland more. We quickly ran back to the boats because inland is all the mosquitoes, and we realized that, so we got away as fast as possible. But for one of the nights, what we did is we shared your moment. So everybody has that special moment in their life that is your go-to, that you go back to, that in times when you have challenges or you're facing anything that is uncertainty, and every person has that, whether it was the 12-year-old that was on the trip or 13-year-old that's on the trip with us to the 45-year-old adult, they all have their own moment. So one night the adults shared their moment with everyone to say, here's what I did in my life, and it's pretty amazing how a lot of those moments actually go back to when you were either a teenager or a young adult, and it actually shows how impactful that time is. And the second night was actually that opportunity for the students to actually share their moment as well. So we took it very, very seriously. There was just the feeling of support and that whole community around there in those moments as well. So that was a very special time. There was not a dry eye on the boat, so we added water to the ocean as well. I added the most, I think.
That should we start tearing up now.
Yeah, I know, I'm like, dang it. Oh, practice. You're not in front of a crowd. So this is just a photo of at nighttime, actually, so you can kind of see how the sun is going down and we just have lights within the boat, so that you would really just see the other boats and the stars at that moment. So that even there makes it even more of a special place.
So on this slide, there's 2 pictures. One of the pictures is a student. It was kind of earlier in the morning. She doesn't look super happy, but she was having a great time. She is holding the lines, which when you're sailing, you don't call them ropes, because you call them lines, because they're serving a purpose. Usually, no sailor would call them a rope. So she is kind of coiling up the lines, kind of making the boat tidy, because on these catamarans, these big 45 long boats, the lines had to be very thick and in order to have a lot of power. So she's folding up, coiling up the lines that we would use to anchor to the dock. So she was kind of cleaning it up just to make sure, because the students were oriented with the boat, but very easy to trip over, you know, like a 2-inch, 3-inch radius thick rope, or get all tangled up, and we didn't want any injuries, and luckily we didn't have any. So the students were responsible for making sure, and you know, when you have 9 people on a boat and you're out at sea, you have to be very careful, you know, making sure you're thinking about throwing away your trash and just keeping up with your things, because I'm in a small space hosting 9 people. It'd be easy to just spread everything out everywhere, but we couldn't have things that were not kept up and tidy, you know, that would fly off the boat while we were sailing. So everyone had to be really responsible for the things, and the students definitely got put to work. And midway through the trip, the captain decided he wanted a clean boat. Some of them had, you know, spilled a drink or done different things. So, hey, come on in. Well, thank you. And the captain had them take buckets and, you know, wash down the boat, take some soap, scrub, and then another student would have to come through. At least the girls' boat did. Did y'all's boat? Oh.
No.
Even the girls' boat. I was on the girls' boat to work, and then we had to throw more water onto it. So students definitely got to work. And another picture is the students. They're getting ready to kind of hook up to an anchored buoy that was offshore, and which we would call mooring. So you would have to reach down with a tool, kind of like a hook, a really long hook, and kind of grab onto the rope, pull it up closer to the boat, and the students would attach it so that we wouldn't go drifting off into sea in the middle of the night.
Question.
Yes.
So did you have like a girls' boat and a boys' boat?
Essentially, we had 6 girls, 6 boys that were students. We had I think 4 women staff and then 8 men staff that were on the trip, or adults. And the way we divided it up, and I'll show you a picture of who was on what boat. We had one boat which had 4 female students, and then it had 2 female adults, 2 male adults. And we nicknamed that one the sorority house. You'll see a picture in a couple of slides. Another boat had just all boys. It was 4 teenage boys and then 4 adult men all on a boat. I'll tell you their name in a couple of minutes.
That was our boat.
Yeah, that was Jared's boat.
Yeah.
And then we had another boat, which Spencer was on, that was, it had 2 female students, 2 male students, 2 female staff, 2 male staff. So we kind of didn't really, I mean, there was a rhyme and reason to kind of putting who on what boat, but it was a really unique combination. It was really fun to kind of see the contrast. Each boat had its own personality, and it was really fun.
Mine was the quiet and calm one. It was nice being able to pick the boats.
Spencer picked the boat.
So kind of going back to the skills of independence and social skills, so speaking loud and clear. So we'll talk about how we prepared meals, but we did prepare meals on the boat in the tight quarters. And so you had to communicate as you were doing that. But once everything was done, you had to be very loud and clear as far as what you were reaching for or what you were grabbing, and communicating, always communicating. Even when we were sailing, the communication that had to be maintained, because if you were, say, tacking and the sail is coming over to the other side of the boat, you need to make sure that everybody's aware of that, everybody's in their position, and then you're able to do that effectively. So the same communication that we did while we were sailing, we brought into the kitchen when we were both requesting what we were ordering, or well, the students, they did all the preparation and cooking within in the kitchen as well. But we did have some opportunities when we first landed where we were in more public areas and they had to advocate for themselves at a restaurant and in different unfamiliar areas as well.
Just really quick, if I can interject, those kitchens were all very small, and some of these students hadn't done a lot of cooking in the past, so it was kind of a combination of all that. It was a lot of teamwork and a lot of communication for even just the meal prep and cleanup, and that was a huge part of it as well.
Yeah. And this slide is talking about, I was going to tell you about communication between different responsibilities. So there's two pictures of our students. One of the pictures is the girls' boat, and we have our girls that are up kind of in the captain's chair. One of our students was at the helm, which is kind of what you would just call like the steering wheel, and she was steering the boat, controlling which way we were going. Another student was kind of sitting back and waiting her turn to be able to be at the helm, because there was essentially three pretty active positions, but they would rotate through, and the students were just asked to remain engaged and stay up there with one another and communicating. Another student is kind of controlling the lines for when we were tacking, so that would be when we were kind of sailing kind of into the wind. You would kind of go at somewhat of like a 45-degree angle from where the wind is coming from, and then you can only go that direction for so long if you're trying to go straight, but you can't sail right into the wind. So then you would need to do something called tack, which is basically switch 90 degrees, and now you're kind of going 45 degrees on the opposite, I guess, quadrant for those of you who are mathematically oriented, but you're kind of zigzagging almost through the wind. So you need to have a lot of communication preparing to tack. These really big boats, the sails, as soon as you switch, the sail will also kind of switch to go to the other side, and it's really heavy, there's an impact. So it's always really important that everyone was paying attention and communicating. And we also have a front sail, and then you have a sail that's kind of in the back called the mainsail, and it has something that's called a boom, and it's kind of like a long metal piece that's at the bottom of the sail that kind of goes back and forth, and it's really heavy, and if you're anywhere close to it, it would be bad news, because it could potentially, I'm sure if you've seen it in a movie, it could completely knock you off a boat or give you a really bad concussion. So the students had to, they couldn't really play around, they had to take it seriously, communicating with one another, and another student was responsible for trimming the mainsail, so kind of being able to tighten up the sail depending on where we were at with the point of sail. So one student might be checking kind of where's the wind coming from, kind of getting the wind indication, and they might tell another student, the helmsman might say like, hey, trim in on the mainsail a little bit so that we could go faster or be more effective. And we did have a race between the three boats, and the girls did win because they had really good communication. I'm just kidding, but so definitely a lot of communication, and I mean during sailing, and then outside of sailing, sharing those close quarters. We had to really communicate while we're cooking, making sure no one's getting in the way of one another, getting hurt, and then just good open communication, so that no conflicts would arise was really important, especially being on an all-girls boat. We definitely had to do that.
So some of the things that we did, so we kind of opportunities to do things that most people haven't been able to do. So this is actually a barracuda that came onto one of the lines that people were fishing. So all of you who have touched a barracuda, raise your hand. Yeah. But we did that. We also did snuba. So snuba is not quite scuba diving. It's close to it. You actually have the tank on a floating raft above you, and you have a line that's attached to you. So you do have a scuba diver that's with you. And then this is the first time for all of our students experiencing something like this. And we actually had the opportunity and the luck to have a school of dolphins actually come up and bump one of our students' legs, and then everybody jumped in the water to try and see the dolphins. But even the scuba diver instructors that were a part of that, it's not very common that happens. That's very, very rare for it. I think at that same time, that's when we had a giant rainbow that came across the entire thing. So all of that all at once, it was like, it's too much to handle. And so I added more water into the ocean again for it. So, and we had touched on this, so again, for our students, they sailed to these islands, and then we got to go onto that island and hike up to the top of the mountain there as well. And I think that was, Jorge was amazing. He definitely stepped in some mud, lost his both flip-flops at once, but never complained once, and it was one of the most amazing things to see as a group. We made it up there as well.
Probably had 200 mosquito bites on his arm too.
Yeah, he was running defense for me, all the mosquitoes. This actually, Cesar, it's your choral name up there. So Cesar and his guide Jim, they were on the quest to discover Cesar's name in choral. And at the end of the trip, they actually did succeed, and they were able to do that as well.
Nice. Do you still have that coral? Good souvenir.
And we had touched on the sightseeing portion of that as well, so just that opportunity to experience another culture.
So Jared kind of covered a little bit about the scuba experience. These are some more pictures. Got a picture of one of the dolphins swimming through, and then another photo of one of our students, Adonis, who is kind of putting on the gear and the breathing apparatus. I love the water, but I've never done anything like scuba diving. And snuba diving is kind of like, you know, the level under scuba diving. You know, you don't have to have your certification, but it's simulating that same experience where you're putting on a breathing apparatus, which I even found myself getting a little bit nervous, and I love swimming. And I always try to hold my breath really long. So putting that on was like real, like, oh, I'm gonna have to rely on this. I'm gonna really have to trust these people around me. And I got to go down, there's another picture, my student, Kaylee, she was with one of the diving instructors, Kaylee Nielsen, yeah, she's wonderful.
She's my student.
She's great. And I got to go down with her, and it was just a surreal experience. I just got goosebumps thinking about it again. Going down there, you know, Kaylee has, as you know, her TBI, she she's legally blind, she's losing her vision. And so to get to experience the ocean underneath and being able to go down and like feel the bottom of the ocean and explore, you know, the coral and just even just the sounds. And so the students weren't able to see maybe a lot, and they weren't able to communicate verbally. So they're really having to trust and just kind of remain calm. And Kaylee and I were down there, and I remember thinking after 20 minutes, you know, I was attached to a different tank. I remember thinking, like, this is just so crazy. Like, we have been surviving underneath the water for 20 minutes, and you know, and she's just swimming, and she's just letting, you know, trusting someone to guide her, and she's getting this incredible experience that she would never have done. And she said that was the coolest thing she's ever done, and it was just really cool just to follow along and watching her just explore. And then another picture is, I think it's Cesar up on the kind of the floating oxygen device, getting ready. And how many feet did you go down, Cesar?
17 feet, but it was terrifying.
17 feet. And did you know, had you had much swimming experience before this trip?
No, none.
So Cesar had not had much swimming experience before going on this trip, and he went down underneath the ocean and was down there for how many minutes, do you think?
Probably like, I'll say about 30 seconds, because then I panicked.
I don't think, he went down further. You can't go 17 feet down in 30 seconds. I was but it was really cool to see the students. You know, it is scary, but getting outside of their comfort zone. I mean, I was proud of you, Cesar, for getting in there after having not swim much in his life before this trip. So definitely one of the coolest parts of the trip.
All right, so we got about 5 minutes, and we want to get to the close of it, so we'll go through some of these pretty quickly. But we talked about the orientation on the boat. So when we were on top of the boat, so you're communicating whether port, starboard, to, what was the front again? Hang it?
The bow.
The bow, yeah. The bow. And so you had to get used to using those terms. Clearly, if you don't use it, you lose it. So we would start every day with orienting on the boat and calling out where we were at, and walk around and tour the boat at the start of the day, so that when we were actually sailing, then it was kind of like you warmed up your muscles and you were ready to move forward as well.
And for the compass, sorry to interject there, rather than having a student try and like use a magnifier to look at the compass, we would just say, all right, you want to stay somewhere within 5 degrees of 280 degrees, and we would announce like every 3 seconds what degree you're at. So you're at 285, 290, 292, 295, you're clearly going up, so you have to adjust to bring it back down, and then you'd announce the numbers as you're going back down, and if you go down too far, then you announce it and come back up.
I have a question.
Yes.
So there are a lot of blind sailors who do it independently, and there's specialized equipment from what I understand. Did you use any specialized equipment with the kids, or did you primarily just use adaptations?
Primarily adaptations for this.
Okay.
So actually we already talked about this, and then a part of what we wanted to take from the trip as well were kind of daily things that you could implement. So that was mental and physical as a part of that. So starting the day with a meditation and a brief exercise. So we got to come together as a team and we did an exercise, and then we finished that with a very basic breathing technique. We had singing bowls with us, so we would actually count that out as a team and then kind of set the day right. So then that way it's something that you can easily bring back and have a part of something that you learned from this experience too.
Here we have pictures of each of the different boats. So boys' boat was nicknamed Smells Like Ship, and it sure did. You can think about being on a boat for 7 days, and our plumbing system, you know, we didn't, I don't know, empty everything into the ocean. So
Clues.
Yeah. So you really didn't want to upset everyone would know who, you know, had an upset stomach after dinner. It was pretty close quarters. So that was Smells Like Ship. And in the middle we have what we nicknamed, our name was Blue Rico. But after the second day of the trip, we became the sorority house, or the sorority boat, including Mark Ashton and Dave Nigro, who's on our board. They were part of the sorority. And then the last boat was Oracle, Spencer's boat. Pretty nice, chill group of teenagers, no drama or anything. All the kids would always swim over to our boat because we did the best at rationing our food. So Smells Like Ship would come over and steal our snacks. And, there was one night when we had adults on one boat and students were on the other boat, and we watched one of our students, Adonis, who is going through kind of a growing phase, eating a ton of food, sleeping all the time, and we watched him, and he's totally blind, go into the boat, and he went into the the boat was set up the same on the inside. He knew exactly where to go, where the Oreos would probably be stashed, and he went and ate all of our Oreos.
Motivation.
So we'll move forward and go to our kind of takeaways from the trip, where I think, we'll start, Spencer, if you want to start. And then
my biggest takeaway was just the first for everybody, that it was pretty special to be able to be a part of that for all our students. So these are, I'm sure, just half of what there really was for our students and even staff. First plane ride, first boat ride, first time outside the continental U.S., first time using their passport, first fish caught, first time eating mofongo, which is like a fried plantain thing there's a picture of soon. First time jumping off the side of a boat, first time in a castle, first time snuba, first time seeing a seashell, lighthouse, sleeping outside. First time getting the rope caught in the engine, that was me.
Nice.
First time for students speaking up, first time cracking an egg, which I couldn't believe because she was in my summer program. First time cleaning clothes with salt water, first time washing dishes. First time swimming with dolphins, getting seasick, fundraising. Everybody got a real tattoo, just kidding. First time being a part of a documentary, which we had a film crew with us, and the documentary is going to come out soon. First time with seeing a sea turtle, first time shaking your hand like you mean it, first time feeling alive, first time feeling like you accomplished something. Cool.
I'll share. Or no, Chris, go ahead.
Well, I would say seeing the growth in the students and the staff over such a short period of time. The first for all the students, and you know, when we caught fish and some of the that had never touched a fish before. At first they were a little skeptical, but just seeing all of that is really cool. So first time on the airplane, I think there were several students before, and by the end of the week, I mean, you could tell just confidence levels and spirits were awesome.
I think it was for me was the respect that they earned from the captains on the ships. So we came in there and they didn't know what to expect, and I know that first day out there was a lot of hesitation, and our guys earned the respect of those captains at the end of that ship. That part gives me goosebumps because they showed that they can do anything that they put their mind to, and they were able to change that perspective for those captains.
Won't forget it.
No.
Mine was a moment, one of the girls on my boat, before we went on the trip, we had kind of like an introduction. Everybody came here to FBC before we started training with parents, families, and we just kind of talked about the trip, answered questions, but all of the students went around and said why they were coming on this trip. And one of my students I had previous experience with or I had known from a summer program, she had said just because her vision is impaired doesn't mean her quality of life has to be impaired. So going on the trip, there was a night when a storm was coming through, and she was at the helm, and she was, you know, we were riding these huge waves, like a big tropical depression had actually kind of been coming around Puerto Rico, which was kind of scary, and she was just up at the helm, no fear, and I said, how's it, you know, how is it? Like, are you having so much fun? Just thinking like, yeah, this is so great. And she just looked at me and she said, this is just the most incredible thing. And I asked her like, oh, why? And she said, this is the one and only time I'll get to drive, and someone will trust me. And I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it now. And I just remember thinking, like, that's what the trip was all about, to give that student that opportunity to do something she didn't know she would be able to do, but to be able to go and tell other people, like, oh, I might not drive a car, but I can drive a 45-foot catamaran through a storm and do it really well. Do you know how to do that? And so it's just really cool to give the students that opportunity. And she won't ever, I think, let anybody tell her, if someone says you can't do this, it's a liability, she'll tell them, well, I did get to do this. And I think it gave her the confidence and the trust. So that was my favorite part. And then Cesar, we brought one of our students from the trip. What was kind of your biggest takeaway, or something that you did that you didn't know you could do before the trip?
I didn't know I could like just be in the middle of the ocean and actually trust like going into the water, and also kind of jumping off the boat. Of course, I was kind of forced to jump off the boat with Spencer, but it ended up being fun. And then I think the scariest thing was just scuba diving, which they explained. But like, I thought the scariest thing was gonna be flying on a plane, because I've never done that before. But I was wrong.
Yeah. So going through all of those things, kind of coming out after the trip, how did it make you feel?
I mean, everything just from that trip, everything was like, I would be fine with doing most of that trip again, except for scuba diving. Everything else would be fine.
Kind of cool to push kids outside of their comfort zones and give them confidence and just kind of put them into their future for what they're going to experience ahead.
So we do have a video of one of the captains. Sharon, do we have enough time to go?
Yeah, it's just after 2. If anybody wants to take off, you're more than welcome to.
It's 2:05, and I think the next one starts at 2:15.
I love projects like this,
We just do
and
half of it.
the fact that
Just stop it at half or something.
it was something new to be sailing with people that visually impaired. It was really intriguing to me because a lot of the things that we do when we sail, the rewards are over by, you perceive them by sight. You get to the most beautiful beaches, and you can see the most beautiful sunset. And then even at night, when you look up, you will see all the stars. Everything comes to you through sight, through your eyes. So
Are you getting ready for your session? So then later on, when you go, it's time to write your name, we've done some of the songs, you might get your head, and you spell this, and names, and now you're doing that. As many things as we can. So year 2, you're ready to date. So yeah, so the grouping is going to be really challenging to figure out when some people do the grouping of the alphabet until you do kind of like for everybody. Okay. So if you're, and that's what I did. I agree master, right? So you're signing, you know, checking on letters yet, right? So you're thinking like you're signing A and B and that instead of like master, this is wrong. You might do something like 5 letters, A, B, C, D, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W. See what I'm doing? Like I'm giving something that I'm telling out what group am I in. Okay. Instead of trying to sign a common shape. She's the one that's so maybe you say that you have 5 groups, 5 letters. So H, yeah, in the second group. And what does it start with? G, H. Something like that, right? You know, so